The progressive rag Salon.com took a break from sharing salacious smut masquerading as human interest stories in order to tell us that a top Catholic official said it's okay to deny women health care because, quote, all you have to do is walk into a 7-Eleven, unquote, to buy birth control. Which is true, so what's the story? Salon.com should really put you less in mind of a Parisian center for intellectual discourse and more in mind of a center of gossip and chatter and inanity. But I kept seeing a variation on this story pop up over and over and over again, which said that, in fact, Cardinal Dolan had said that women could pick up women's birth control at 7-Eleven, which of course is preposterous, right? Like many Catholics, I'm a big fan of Cardinal Dolan. A lot of people think he might be the first American pope, although the last papal election should have proven that we really have no idea what we're talking about when it comes to this sort of thing. But long before Francis was elected, Cardinal Dolan was already making news as being a joyful, radiant witness to the gospel, something that Stephen Colbert, his fellow Catholic, brought attention to. And those of us who've read his writings know that he has a deep sense of holiness and has kind of helped us along the way to it as well. So it's understandable why a lot of people would dislike him. Still, though, I was kind of stunned that he would have said something that short-sighted. I mean, no one thinks that women can really buy copper IUDs and Plan B pills at the 7-Eleven, right? So I decided to watch the original video from which the quote apparently came.
I want to talk to you about one of the cases that is before the Supreme Court. It's known as the Hobby Lobby case, and they're considering whether private companies should be exempt from the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, and the mandate about whether to provide contraceptive coverage to their employees. Where do you stand?
I would be inspired by the Hobby Lobby. America is at her strongest, at her best, when people can bring everything into the public square, including their moral, ethical, spiritual, and religious convictions. And the government should never force us to do anything that is contrary to those deepest held convictions.
But doesn't that set a dangerous precedent if a private company can use religion to deny benefits to its employees?
It could, and as you know, they're arguing that, and the Supreme Court in the past, if I understand correctly, has said, in general, the bias is on the side of the rights of conscience and religious liberty. There may be occasions when that is so detrimental to the common good that it will outweigh it. Is this one of them? I mean, is the ability to buy contraceptives that are now widely available? My Lord, all you have to do is walk into a 7-Eleven or any shop on any street in America and have access to them. Is that right to access those and to have them paid for? Is that such a towering good that it would suffocate the rights of conscience? I don't think so, but I hope the Supreme Court agrees.
At what point in that video did he say that women could pick up female birth control from 7-Eleven? Let's watch the relevant clip again. Watch it closely.
Is the ability to buy contraceptives that are now widely available? My Lord, all you have to do is walk into a 7-Eleven or any shop on any street in America and have access to them. Is that right to access those and to have them paid for? Is that such a towering good that it would suffocate the rights of conscience?
Now notice what he says is that you can get them, it is meaning contraception, at a 7-Eleven or convenience store. Now, maybe when he says them, the inference people might draw is that he means any and all forms of birth control. But in fact, I don't think he's saying that. I mean, all he's saying is that you can get contraception from 7-Eleven. And that's true. Like, very demonstrably true. Now, I saw a lot of commentators draw attention to the fact that Cardinal Dolan is addressing these remarks to a female journalist. I'm not sure what the point of that observation is, though. Is the point that, as a man, Cardinal Dolan has no right telling a woman what she can or can't do with her sexuality? Well, I'll remember that next time some feminist lectures a bro douche about what he can and can't do with his penis when a girl is drunk around him. This reminds me a little bit of the whole argument that celibate men shouldn't be lecturing people about their sexuality. To me, that's always been a bit like saying that you shouldn't listen to someone tell you all about outer space unless they've actually been to space. I doubt you would respect that argument. Or is the argument that because he was saying you can get contraceptions to a woman, he was actually saying you can buy female contraceptives from 7-Eleven? I really hope that's not your argument. We've got this thing in English, it's called the generic you. It's the, impersonal pronoun. It's a more casual way of saying that one could do something. I mean, all you need to do is look up Wikipedia to figure that out. Now, follow through with his argument here. He says that he supports the owners of Hobby Lobby because America is predicated on a principle that people should be free to follow their consciences. The journalist responds by saying, but doesn't that set a dangerous precedent if an employer can deny health care to an employee based on a personal belief? The common rebuttal is, what about a Jehovah's Witness employer? Should they be compelled to pay for an employee's blood transfusion even though it contradicts their religious beliefs? Cardinal Dolan replies, in some extreme cases where it contradicts the common good, that may be the case, but the majority, the preponderance of the time, the individual rights of conscience should be respected. In the case of contraception, he says, since we already have contraception this widely available on the market, is there a good enough reason to override the personal convictions of the Hobby Lobby owners? It would seem that there isn't, then. Follow that argument through. That's the real gist of what he's saying, and that's the strongest case against the contraception mandate. The same writer from Salon whines about how an IUD can cost between $500 and $1,000, which of course makes it inaccessible to a lot of women, unaided by an insurance plan. And even Plan B, even though, as the writer acknowledges, is now available over the counter and no longer requires a prescription, still costs between $50 and $60. So it's still, a bit of an inconvenience. And Cardinal Dolan's point stands. Even if you don't have access to those, you still have access on the market to other comparably effective forms of contraception. From a Catholic perspective, this is unfortunate, but from the perspective of legislation, doesn't that vitiate it as a reason to override the conscience of private business owners? In other words, even if Obama doesn't provide you with Plan B, you still have access to contraception. You'll be fine. And to those who say, well, yeah, you can get condoms, but not the higher quality forms of contraception, and that's really what we're interested in. A, your desire for higher quality contraceptions is now overruling someone else's conscience. Who's imposing on who now? B, let's stop and actually look at the statistics on the various forms of birth control. Now, the studies on this have been pretty extensive, and thankfully they actually have statistics both on the perfect use failure rate, that is to say, what the failure rate should be ideally if everything is done correctly, and typical use failure rate, which has more to do with how things pan out in the real world. So let's take a look at the statistics around condoms. Now, condoms have a 15% typical use failure rate. So, yeah, there's a small but significant chunk of times where it will fail in the real world. But if it's actually used correctly in the perfect use failure rate, it should only be 2% failure rate, which is really not bad. It's quite impressive as far as it goes. Now let's look at the Plan B that Salon.com was so concerned that women should have, with its $50 to $60 range. The typical use failure rate for the Plan B pill is 12.5%. Now, that's a little bit less than the condom, but, not by much. But here's what's interesting. The perfect use failure rate, that is, if you're using it absolutely correctly, guess what that is? It's still 12.5%. Yeah, even if you use it completely correctly, it's still 10% more likely to fail than the thing you can buy at 7-Eleven. And it's so essential for women's health that the government compels employers to pay for this and buy it for their employees. But hey, who can always be bothered to put a condom on somebody you just met at a club, right? Or at least that's the tactic that these clever ads from the Plan B people are using. That's life. Accidents happen. We make mistakes. No one ever plans on having unprotected sex, but it happens to the best of us. Oh, guess I wasn't wearing a condom the whole time. Sorry, I forgot to put my glasses on and check. Oh, well, I'm sure your boss won't mind covering it. It happens to the best of us. And yes, I realize sometimes unplanned pregnancies are the result of a rape, and I'm not trying to trivialize that. But I don't think that's what those ads were talking about. And if they were, then they're the ones that were trivializing rape by calling it a mistake. Now, admittedly, there are other forms of birth control that are statistically more effective at preventing an unplanned pregnancy than either condoms or the Plan B pill. Most of them involve sterilization, injecting yourself with chemicals, and this. The copper IUD. Yeah, this is that thing that Salon.com was so concerned it cost up to $1,000 and, not every woman can afford it. Yeah, the reason it's so expensive is because it's implanted inside the uterus and remains there for years at a time. And if an employer doesn't want to fund this Huxleyan horror being embedded in a woman's body, well, I guess they're shit out of luck. Now, admittedly, this thing has a typical use failure rate and a perfect use failure rate of 0.2%. It's disturbingly effective. But here's the thing, and if you're going to continue to use it or any of the other, expensive and more effective forms of birth control as a rationale for the government compelling employees to pay for it, natural family planning, endorsed by the Catholic Church, endorsed by Cardinal Dolan, or symptoms-based fertility awareness, if you want to use the scientific expression, has a typical use failure rate of 1.8% and a perfect use failure rate of 0.6%. Now, all that's involved with that is paying attention to the woman's body and not having sex during the fertile periods. All it involves is respecting the rhythm of nature and paying attention, basically. So it's free. And it is negligibly less effective than the IUD. It is functionally almost as effective as that. And yet it's so urgent for women's health that the rights of conscience have to be overridden to make sure employers can pay for that. That's nonsense. That's absurd. That's preposterous. And it's dishonest to make that assertion. This is nothing at all like a Jehovah's Witness employer not wanting to pay for a blood transfusion for one of his employees based on his religious beliefs. Now, that's an interesting argument. That's an argument worth having, whether his rights should be protected or not. Does that infringe on the common good? It would seem to. This is nothing like that, because even if an employer doesn't provide for an employee's contraception, it's not like they're going to die because they're not getting their blood. They can, in fact, get a condom at 7-Eleven. Contrary to Plan B, they can be responsible and make sure their maid is wearing it. If they happen to be irresponsible, which is what they would be in that case, then yeah, they can fork over the $50 themselves and get the Plan B, and hope they're not in the 12%. Or, if nothing else, they can just respect what their bodies are telling them and not have sex during the fertile periods. There's not an analogy here. Cardinal Dolan's point is completely sound. The common good is not infringed upon by protecting the rights of conscience of the owners of Hobby Lobby. Moreover, it's not like there's no alternative proposed, because it's not just that the Catholic Church is a proponent of natural family planning, which, again, has a higher effectiveness rate than either the pill or the condom. Here's the evidence for that, by the way, from the Oxford Journal's issue on human reproduction. Check it out. It's also that he has an alternative proposed to Obamacare. One of the other arguments proposed by Salon was that a lot of women use contraception for reasons that are not necessarily contraceptive. Only 14% use them for completely non-contraceptive reasons, but 58% use them for reasons additional to their contraceptive uses, such as preventing migraines, which, as we all know, the only way you can possibly prevent a migraine is to take the pill. But as Cardinal Dolan points out, the Catholic bishops have always been in favor of universal health care. Cardinal Dolan made the point in an interview on Meet the Press that Obama was really burning his bridges by alienating the Catholic community because the Catholic bishops had been in support of universal health care since 1919, and he was really losing a valuable ally with this whole contraception thing. Well, PolitiFact, which if you follow it is a very objective and very thorough website, investigated his claims and found that Cardinal Dolan was completely right. Back in 1919, Father John A. Ryan published the Bishop's Program of Social Reconstruction, a guide to overhauling U.S. social justice. The state, read the guide, should make comprehensive provision for insurance against illness, invalidity, unemployment, and old age. This wasn't the last time the USCCB has supported healthcare expansions. For example, the group has publicly supported a variety of proposals, including former President Bill Clinton's ultimately defeated healthcare plan. And the Catholic Church is uniquely situated to help provide that universal healthcare. As the Fiscal Times reports, the Catholic Church has perhaps the most extensive private healthcare delivery system in the nation. It operates 12.6% of the hospitals in the U.S. Catholic hospitals handle more than their share of Medicare, 16.6%, and Medicaid, 13.65% discharges, meaning that more than 1 in 6 senior and disabled patients get attention from these hospitals, and more than 1 in every 8 low-income patients as well. Almost a third, 32%, of these hospitals are located in rural areas where patients usually have few other options for care. Compared to their competition, Catholic hospitals take a leading role in providing less profitable services to patients. They lead the sector in breast cancer screenings, nutrition programs, trauma, geriatric services, and social work. Universal health care is a human right, and the Catholic Church and the Catholic bishops in America are willing to support it. But Obama has lost that support for the time being because of this unnecessary contraceptive mandate that overrides the rights of conscience. That was Cardinal Dolan's point, and as I've demonstrated, it was a perfectly sound one. Sorry, Salon.com. Except I'm not. Take care.